Hollywood has given us some of the most incredible serial killer movies ever committed to celluloid. We have *7, David Fincher's rain-soaked descent into the 7 deadly sins, where Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman chased a killer so methodical, so philosophically twisted, that the final reveal in that cardboard box became one of the most iconic moments in cinema history. We have Zodiac, another Fincher masterpiece, a sprawling, obsessive, decade-long investigation that showed us what happens when a killer is so smart that the case literally consumes the lives of everyone who touches it. We have The Silence of the Lambs, where Jodie Foster walked into a basement dungeon and came face to face with Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, a performance so terrifyingly brilliant that it won the Academy Award and permanently altered what audiences expected from a screen villain. These are the gold standard. These are the films that every thriller since has been measured against. But what if I told you that one of the most terrifying, most mind-bending, most relentlessly dark and psychologically devastating serial killer thrillers of the last decade did not come from Hollywood? It did not come from a major American studio. It did not feature a single A-list Hollywood star. It was not made with a $100 million budget. It was not marketed across the globe with massive billboard campaigns and late-night talk show appearances. It came from India. It was made in a language that most of the Western world has never heard spoken. It was rejected by producer after producer after producer who said it was too dark for audiences. And it features a villain so deeply disturbing, so meticulously crafted, so psychologically layered, that he will crawl into your subconscious and haunt your dreams for weeks after the credits roll. Welcome to the 9th reel. Today we are stepping into the shadows. We are leaving the light behind. We are breaking down a psychological thriller that is so tightly wound, so relentlessly intense, that it literally leaves you gasping for air by the time it reaches its conclusion. The movie is called Ratsasan, and in the ancient language of Tamil, that word translates to something simple, something primal, something that sends a chill down your spine the moment you understand its meaning. It translates to the demon. If you think you have seen every trick the serial killer genre has to offer, if you believe that *7 and Zodiac have covered every possible angle, every possible narrative innovation, every possible way to construct a cat-and-mouse thriller between a detective and a monster, then I need you to buckle up. Because this movie does not just play by the rules of the genre. It rewrites them, it shatters them, and it builds something entirely new from the wreckage. Before we descend into the blood, the madness, and the psychological warfare that defines Ratsasan, let us take a moment to set the stage. Because context matters. Understanding where this film comes from is essential to understanding why it hits as hard as it does. First and foremost, just like we have discussed in our previous videos on this channel, you need to understand one critical fact. This is not Bollywood. I know that for many international viewers, the word Bollywood has become shorthand for all Indian cinema. When someone says Indian movie, the immediate mental image is song and dance sequences, colorful wedding celebrations, dramatic love stories, and over-the-top action scenes where the hero single-handedly defeats 50 men in slow motion. And listen, there is a time and a place for that. Bollywood has produced some genuinely wonderful films over the decades, and its cultural impact on global entertainment is undeniable. But India is not one film industry. India is a subcontinent of storytelling. It has dozens of distinct film industries, each operating in a different language, each with its own unique history, its own artistic traditions, its own audience expectations, and its own way of telling stories. And Ratsasan comes from one of the oldest, most respected, and most fearless of them all. It comes from the southern state of Tamil Nadu, from an industry known as Kollywood, which produces films in the Tamil language. Now let me tell you something about Tamil cinema that you need to understand. Tamil filmmakers do not flinch. They do not look away from the darkness of the human condition. While many film industries around the world soften their edges to appeal to the widest possible audience, Tamil cinema has a long and proud tradition of staring directly into the abyss. They make films about caste oppression that are so raw they spark real-world social movements. They make action films with a level of visceral, bone-crunching physicality that makes Hollywood action sequences look choreographed and sanitized. And when they decide to make a thriller, when they decide to explore the psychology of evil, they go places that most other industries would not dare to tread. This is the soil from which Ratsasan was born. And the story of how this film came to exist is itself a testament to the power of creative perseverance. The director of Ratsasan is a man named Ram Kumar. Before this film, Ram Kumar was not a famous director. He was not a proven box office commodity. He was a man with a vision, a man who had spent years crafting a screenplay that he believed could stand alongside the greatest serial killer thrillers ever made. He poured his obsession with criminal psychology, his deep love for the films of David Fincher and the crime fiction of Thomas Harris, into a script that was meticulous, terrifying, and uncompromising in its darkness. And then he took that script to producers. And one by one, they turned him down. The rejections were not polite suggestions to make minor adjustments. They were categorical refusals. Producer after producer read the script and said the same thing. This is too dark. This villain is too disturbing. Indian audiences cannot handle this level of psychological horror. You need to add comedy. You need to add a romantic subplot that lightens the mood. You need to make the villain less terrifying, less real, less human. You need to compromise. Ram Kumar refused. Every single time, he refused. He understood something that those producers did not. He understood that the power of his script lay precisely in its darkness. That the moment you soften the villain, the moment you add a comic relief scene to give the audience a break from the tension, the moment you pull your punches to make things more comfortable, you destroy the very thing that makes the story work. The terror of Ratsasan is not a flaw to be corrected. It is the entire point. Finally, after what must have felt like an eternity of closed doors and rejected meetings, Ram Kumar found a producer willing to take the risk. The film was green-lit. It was made. It was released in Indian theaters. And what happened next proved every single one of those doubting producers spectacularly, devastatingly wrong. Ratsasan did not just succeed. It exploded. It became a monumental blockbuster. It became a cultural phenomenon. It became the kind of film that people did not just watch but experienced. The kind of film that audiences walked out of in stunned silence, unable to speak for several minutes. The kind of film that dominated social media conversations for weeks. The kind of film that was remade in multiple other Indian languages because the demand was so overwhelming. It became, almost overnight, a cult classic. Because it turns out that Indian audiences could absolutely handle the darkness. They did not just handle it, they embraced it, they craved it. They recognized, as audiences around the world have always recognized, that the greatest thrillers are the ones that refuse to look away. So what is Ratsasan actually about? Let me walk you through the story. And I want to be clear from the outset. I am going to give you enough to understand the setup, the characters, the conflict, and the stakes. But I am not going to spoil the revelations that make this film extraordinary. Those moments belong to the film. They need to unfold in front of your eyes, not in a summary on a YouTube video. So consider this your guided entry point into the world of Ratsasan. Meet Arun, played by the actor Vishnu Vishal, in what many consider to be the performance of his career. Arun is not your typical movie protagonist. He does not want to be a police officer. He has absolutely zero interest in law enforcement. His dream, his passion, the thing that burns inside him with an intensity that borders on obsession, is to become a film director. But not just any film director. Arun wants to make a serial killer movie, a masterpiece of the genre, a film that would stand alongside Seven and The Silence of the Lambs as one of the greatest explorations of criminal psychology ever put on screen. And here's the thing about Arun, he has done the work. This is not a man with a vague dream and no preparation. Arun has spent years, literal years, immersing himself in the world of serial killers. He has read every book. He has studied every case file. He has memorized the behavioral profiles of the most notorious psychopaths in history, from Ted Bundy to Jeffrey Dahmer to the Zodiac killer to Jack the Ripper. He understands how they think. He understands their patterns, their rituals, their psychological signatures, the specific ways in which organized serial killers stage their crime scenes to communicate something, to send a message, to leave a signature that is uniquely theirs. Arun has taken all of this research and channeled it into a screenplay, a meticulously crafted, psychologically authentic serial killer movie script that he believes is the best work he will ever produce. There is just one problem. Nobody wants to make it. Arun takes his script to every producer and every production house he can find, and they all reject him. Some say the script is too dark. Some say there is no market for this kind of film. Some simply do not return his calls. The rejection is crushing. It is soul-destroying in the way that only creative rejection can be. The way that only being told your best work, the thing you poured your heart into, is worthless can be. And then life delivers another blow. Arun faces immense pressure from his family. In Indian culture and in many cultures around the world, there is an enormous expectation placed on young men to find stable employment, to provide for their families, to pursue practical careers rather than artistic dreams. Arun's family does not understand his obsession with filmmaking. They do not understand why he spends his days reading about murderers instead of studying for government exams. And after his father passes away, the pressure becomes unbearable. Arun is told, in no uncertain terms, that his filmmaking dream is over. He needs a real job. He needs to be responsible. Defeated, heartbroken, and carrying the weight of a dream that has been systematically crushed, Arun gives up. He takes a government examination. He qualifies, and he becomes a rookie police sub-inspector, assigned to a local station. The man who wanted to hunt serial killers on screen is now wearing a uniform and handling petty complaints at a desk. Arun believes his life of chasing psychopaths, even fictional ones, is over. He believes that chapter is closed. He is resigned to a life of mediocrity, of unfulfilled potential, of quiet desperation. He is dead wrong. Shortly after Arun joins the police force, a discovery is made that changes everything. The body of a teenage schoolgirl is found. And when I say found, I do not mean discovered peacefully. The body is found stuffed inside a black garbage bag, discarded like waste, left in a location that suggests the killer viewed his victim as less than human. The body shows signs of extreme brutality. It has been mutilated in specific, deliberate ways that go far beyond what a crime of passion or a random act of violence would produce. The senior officers at the station react the way overworked, under-resourced police officers in a developing region often react. They treat it as an isolated incident, a tragic but singular act of violence. They begin looking for the usual suspects, the people closest to the victim, the family members, the boyfriends, the neighbors. They follow standard procedure. They fill out the paperwork. They plan to close the case as quickly and quietly as possible. But Arun sees something different. Arun looks at the crime scene, and everything he has spent years studying, all those books, all those case files, all those behavioral profiles, all of it suddenly activates in his brain like a circuit being switched on. He notices details that his colleagues overlook entirely: the way the body is posed, the specific nature of the mutilation, the items that were left at the scene, and, crucially, the items that were taken. The deliberate, almost theatrical quality of the presentation. Arun recognizes a pattern. He recognizes a signature. And in that moment, standing at a crime scene surrounded by colleagues who see nothing unusual, Arun realizes something that fills him with absolute, bone-deep horror. This is not a random murder. This is not an isolated incident. This is the work of a serial killer. A highly organized, highly intelligent, psychologically complex predator who has planned this murder meticulously, who has likely killed before, and who will absolutely, undoubtedly, kill again. Arun's unproduced movie script, the screenplay that every producer rejected, the fictional story he crafted from years of research, is suddenly playing out in real life, right in front of him, in his own jurisdiction. And the terrifying irony is not lost on him. He wanted to tell a story about hunting a serial killer. Now the universe has answered, but this time, The victims are real. The blood is real. The monster is real. And there is no director to yell cut. Now the rookie cop, the man nobody takes seriously, the failed filmmaker who was never supposed to be a police officer in the first place, must use his years of cinematic and psychological research to hunt down a real-world predator. He must apply everything he learned from studying fiction to the most horrifyingly non-fictional situation imaginable. But there is a massive problem. Nobody believes him. His senior officers do not believe a serial killer is operating in their jurisdiction. They think Aaron is a naive, overly dramatic rookie who has watched too many Hollywood movies. They mock him. They dismiss his theories. They tell him to go back to his desk and stop embarrassing the department. One by one, they shut down every lead he tries to pursue, every connection he tries to make, every piece of evidence he tries to present. They leave Aaron completely, utterly, dangerously alone. And so Arun does the only thing he can do. He begins investigating on his own, quietly, obsessively, desperately, working after hours, visiting crime scenes without authorization, building a profile of the killer using methods he learned not from police training but from the books of FBI profilers and the films of David Fincher. He is a one-man investigation unit armed with nothing but his knowledge, his instinct, and a growing, gnawing terror that the killer is not slowing down. The killer is accelerating, and the clock is ticking toward the next victim. Let me tell you exactly why Ratsasan is an absolute masterpiece of the thriller genre. And I use that word, masterpiece, with full deliberation. This is not a film that is merely good. This is not a film that is surprisingly decent for an Indian thriller. This is a film that operates at the highest level of the genre, a level occupied by a very small number of films in the history of cinema, and it earns its place at that table through craft, through intelligence, through an unrelenting commitment to tension, and through the creation of one of the most disturbing villains ever put on screen. Let us start with the pacing, because the pacing of Ratsasan is a thing of absolute beauty. In an era where most thrillers pad their runtime with unnecessary subplots, romantic diversions, and filler scenes designed to hit a marketable runtime, Ratsasan is ruthlessly economical with its storytelling. Every single scene in this film exists for a reason. Every conversation moves the investigation forward. Every clue Aaron discovers leads to another question, which leads to another revelation, which leads to another dead end, which leads to a twist that reconfigures everything you thought you understood. The film is structured as a classic cat-and-mouse thriller, but it plays with the structure in ways that keep you perpetually off balance. Just when you think Aaron is closing in on the killer, just when the pieces seem to be falling into place, just when you allow yourself a moment of hope that the monster will be caught, the film pulls the rug out from under you with such force that you feel it physically. The killer is always one step ahead, 2 steps ahead. And every time he outmaneuvers Aaron, the stakes escalate. The victims become younger. The murders become more elaborate. The psychological torment becomes more personal. The film creates a mounting sense of dread that is almost unbearable, a feeling that you are watching a countdown to something catastrophic, and that no matter how hard Aaron tries, he might not be fast enough. The screenplay by Ram Kumar is structured with a precision that would make David Fincher proud. The clues are planted early, hidden in plain sight, embedded in conversations and visual details that seem inconsequential on first viewing, but reveal themselves to be absolutely critical on reflection. Ratsasan is one of those rare films that actually rewards a second viewing, because the second time through you see the breadcrumbs the filmmaker left, and you realize that the answer was in front of you the entire time. You just didn't know what you were looking at. That is the mark of a screenplay that has been refined to perfection. But the pacing, the structure, the cleverness of the script, all of that would mean nothing without the right villain. And this is where Ratsasan transcends from a great thriller into something legendary. The villain of Ratsasan is known as Christopher. And Christopher is, without exaggeration, one of the most terrifying antagonists in the history of the thriller genre. I am placing him in the conversation with Hannibal Lecter. I am placing him in the conversation with John Doe from Seven. I am placing him in the conversation with Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. and I am doing so with complete confidence, because Christopher earns that comparison through the sheer, suffocating horror of his presence. Now, I am going to be very careful here. I am not going to reveal Christopher's backstory. I am not going to tell you who he is, where he comes from, what happened to him, or why he does what he does. Because discovering Christopher's origin, piecing together the puzzle of what created this monster, is one of the single most chilling experiences in cinema. It is a revelation that recontextualizes everything you have watched up to that point, and it lands with the force of a physical blow. I will not take that from you, but I will tell you what Christopher does. I will tell you how he operates. And that alone should be enough to make you understand why this villain has become the stuff of nightmares for millions of people around the world. Christopher does not simply kill his victims. That would be too easy. That would be too quick. That would not satisfy the specific, twisted psychological need that drives him. Christopher targets teenage schoolgirls. He selects them carefully, methodically, studying their routines, learning their vulnerabilities, identifying the moments when they are most alone and most trusting. And then he approaches them, not with violence, not with force. He approaches them with something far more insidious. He approaches them with charm, with friendliness, with the appearance of safety. He uses magic tricks. Let that detail sink in for a moment. This serial killer uses magic tricks to lure his victims. He performs illusions, sleight of hand, card tricks, the kind of innocent, delightful entertainment that children love and trust. He makes them laugh. He makes them feel special. He makes them believe that this friendly, magical stranger is someone they can follow, someone they can trust, someone who means them no harm. And then the mask comes off. Not metaphorically, literally. Christopher wears masks. Deformed, grotesque, deeply unsettling masks that distort his features into something inhuman. These masks serve a dual purpose. They conceal his identity from potential witnesses. But more importantly, they are part of his ritual. They are part of the psychological landscape of his crimes. When the mask goes on, Christopher is no longer pretending to be normal. He is revealing what he truly is. And what he truly is something that will make your skin crawl. The physicality of the killer, the way the actor portrays Christopher's movements, his mannerisms, his body language, is extraordinary. There is a stillness to Christopher that is far more frightening than any amount of screaming or raging could ever be. He moves with a calm, deliberate precision that suggests total control, total awareness, total absence of empathy. When he looks at his victims, there is nothing behind his eyes. No rage, no passion, no madness, just a cold, clinical fascination, like a scientist observing an experiment. And that emptiness, that void where a human soul should be, is what makes Christopher so deeply, fundamentally terrifying. Now we need to talk about the element that transforms Ratsasan from a visually intense thriller into a full-body sensory assault. We need to talk about the music. The background score of Ratsasan was composed by a man named Gibran, and what Gibran created for this film is nothing short of a masterwork of psychological manipulation through sound. In most thrillers, the music follows a predictable pattern. When something scary is about to happen, the music swells. It gets louder, more dissonant, more aggressive. It tells you, the viewer, that you should be afraid. It telegraphs the scare before it arrives. And while that approach can be effective, it also creates a degree of predictability that dulls the impact over time. You learn to anticipate the scares because the music warns you they are coming. Gibran took a completely different approach with Ratsasan. He understood that the most effective horror is not the horror that announces itself. It is the horror that creeps up on you. It is the horror that is already inside the room before you realize the door was ever opened. For the killer Christopher, Gibran composed a specific musical motif, a theme. And this theme is not what you would expect. It is not a crashing orchestra. It is not a thunderous, aggressive assault of sound. It is a piano melody, a simple, delicate, almost childlike piano melody. The notes are sparse, fragile, slightly discordant, played with a hesitancy that makes them sound like a music box that is winding down, like a lullaby being sung by someone who has forgotten how lullabies are supposed to end. And this melody becomes Christopher's signature. Whenever Christopher is near, whenever the killer is approaching, whenever the scene is about to shift from safety to danger, you hear this piano theme. It starts quietly, almost subliminally, mixed beneath the ambient sounds of the scene. You might not even consciously register it the first time, but your subconscious does. Your body does. You begin to feel uneasy without knowing why. Your heartbeat quickens, your muscles tense. Something inside you recognizes that the melody means danger, even before your rational mind catches up. And then, as the film progresses, as the body count rises, as the investigation deepens, that piano melody takes on a Pavlovian quality. The moment you hear those first few notes, your entire body responds with dread. Not because the music is loud or aggressive, but because the film has trained you, conditioned you, to associate that innocent, broken piano sound with pure, distilled terror. It is a brilliantly insidious piece of psychological engineering. By the time you reach the final act of the film, the mere sound of a piano note is enough to make you want to cover your eyes. It is easily one of the greatest thriller soundtracks ever composed. It belongs in the same conversation as Howard Shore's score for The Silence of the Lambs, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's score for The Social Network, and Johan Johansson's score for Sicario. It is that good. And it proves that you do not need a massive orchestral budget to create something that burrows into the human psyche and refuses to leave. There is one more element of Ratsasan's craft that I need to highlight, because it is something that international audiences might not immediately appreciate, but that adds an enormous layer of power to the film. The social commentary. Ratsasan is not just a thriller about catching a killer. It is a film that shines a harsh, unforgiving light on how society fails to protect its most vulnerable members. The victims in this film are teenage schoolgirls, children, and the film does not shy away from asking uncomfortable questions about how and why these children were vulnerable in the first place. It examines the gaps in the system, the institutional apathy, the bureaucratic indifference, the societal attitudes that allow predators to operate in plain sight. It examines how a killer can prey on children in a community where everyone knows everyone, and yet no one sees anything until it is too late. These themes give Ratsasan a weight and a relevance that extends far beyond the thriller genre. It is not just entertainment, it is a warning. As Ratsasan moves into its second half, the film shifts gears in a way that is both narratively brilliant and emotionally devastating. Because something changes, something fundamental changes about the nature of the conflict. And that change takes what was already an intensely gripping investigation thriller and transforms it into something far more personal, far more urgent, and far more terrifying. The killer stops targeting strangers. Let me say that again so the full weight of it lands. The killer stops targeting strangers. The victims are no longer random schoolgirls selected from the anonymous masses. The predator has become aware of Arun. Christopher knows someone is hunting him. And instead of retreating, instead of going underground, instead of fleeing to another city to continue his work in the shadows, Christopher does something that reveals the true depth of his psychopathy. He turns his attention toward the people Aaron cares about. The investigation stops being an intellectual exercise. It stops being a puzzle to be solved. It becomes a desperate, frantic, white-knuckled race against a clock that is counting down to a horror too personal to contemplate. Arun is no longer just a detective pursuing a case. He is a man fighting to save someone he loves from a monster he helped awaken. And the guilt of that, the crushing, suffocating guilt of knowing that his investigation may have put his loved ones directly in the crosshairs of a psychopath, adds an emotional dimension to the film that elevates it far beyond the typical thriller formula. I will not spoil the climax for you. I will not tell you who lives and who dies. I will not reveal whether Aaron catches the killer or whether the killer escapes. I will not describe the final confrontation. Those moments belong to you and to the film. They are sacred in the way that all great cinematic climaxes are sacred. Moments that deserve to unfold in real time, in the dark, with no foreknowledge and no preparation. But I will tell you this, I promise you this on everything I believe about cinema. The final 30 minutes of Ratsasan are an absolute masterclass in sustained tension. The tension does not pulse. It does not rise and fall in waves. It climbs. It climbs relentlessly, mercilessly, without pause, without relief, without a single moment where you can exhale and reassure yourself that everything will be okay. Because the film refuses to reassure you. It keeps you suspended in a state of maximum dread, hanging over an abyss by your fingernails. And it does not let you go. There are moments in the climax where you will find yourself physically gripping the edge of your seat so hard your knuckles turn white. There are moments where you will shout at the screen, pleading with a fictional character to run faster, to think quicker, to do something, anything, before it is too late. There are moments where the camera holds on a single image for just a beat too long, and in that extra beat, your imagination fills in the blank with something worse than anything the film could show you, and you realize that the director has weaponized your own psychology against you. The physical confrontation between Aaron and Christopher is raw, ugly, and brutally realistic. This is not a choreographed action sequence where two trained fighters exchange elegant blows in slow motion. This is desperate, sloppy, animalistic violence. This is two human beings trying to destroy each other in a confined space, fueled by rage and terror and adrenaline, and it looks exactly as messy and horrifying as real violence looks. There is no glory in it. There is no heroism. There is only survival. And when it ends, when the final frame cuts to black, when the screen goes dark and the credits begin to roll, you will not move. You will sit in silence. You will stare at the screen. And you will need a moment, a long moment, to process what you have just experienced. Because Ratsasan does not give you a neat, comfortable ending. It gives you an honest one. And honest endings, in the serial killer genre, are never comfortable. I have watched hundreds of thriller films. I have studied the genre obsessively. I have seen every David Fincher film multiple times. I have binged every season of True Detective and Mindhunter. I have explored Korean thrillers like Memories of Murder, and I Saw the Devil. I have gone deep into the European thriller tradition with films like Insomnia and The Secret in Their Eyes. And I can tell you, with absolute conviction, that the climax of Ratsasan belongs in the highest tier of thriller cinema. It is that powerful. It is that devastating. It is that brilliantly constructed. Let me put Ratsasan in context for you. Let me tell you exactly where it sits in the global landscape of cinema and why it matters. If you are a fan of David Fincher, if C7 and Zodiac are among your favorite films, you need to watch Ratsasan. Because Ratsasan captures the same atmosphere of oppressive dread, the same methodical investigation structure, the same feeling that evil is always one step ahead, that defines Fincher's best work. But it brings something Fincher's films do not have. It brings a raw, ground-level emotional intensity that comes from being set in a world where the police infrastructure is underfunded, where the systems designed to protect people are broken, and where a single individual's determination may be the only thing standing between a predator and his next victim. If you love True Detective Season 1, if that long, hypnotic journey through the bayous of Louisiana with Rust Cohle and Marty Hart is your idea of peak television, you need to watch Ratsasan, because it explores the same terrain of obsessive investigation and psychological toll. The same idea that hunting monsters requires you to stare so long into the darkness that the darkness begins to change you. If you have watched Memories of Murder, Bong Joon-ho's masterpiece about the first serial killer case in Korean history, and appreciated how that film uses a real-world investigation to illuminate systemic failures and societal blind spots, you need to watch Ratsasan. Because it does the same thing, in a different cultural context, with the same devastating effectiveness. If you have seen I Saw the Devil, Kim Ji-woon's relentless, brutal exploration of what happens when the hunter becomes as monstrous as the hunted, you will find a kindred spirit in Ratsasan, because it asks similar questions about the cost of justice and the thin line between catching a killer and becoming consumed by the chase. And here is the thing that makes Ratsasan perhaps most remarkable of all. This film was made in Tamil Nadu, India. It was made within a film industry that the global audience barely knows exists. It was made by a first-time director who was rejected by every producer in the industry. It was made on a budget that would barely cover the catering costs of a mid-tier Hollywood production, and yet it stands, proudly and without apology, among the greatest serial killer thrillers ever made, in any language, in any country, in any era. That is not just impressive filmmaking. That is a statement about the universality of great storytelling. It proves that you do not need a Hollywood studio, $100 million budget, or a cast of internationally recognized stars to create something that shakes people to their core. You need a great script. You need a fearless director. You need a villain who embodies genuine evil. And you need the courage to refuse to compromise. Ram Kumar had all of those things, and the result is Ratsasan. So here's my question to you. Have you watched Ratsasan? If you have, I want to hear from you right now. Drop a comment and tell me what you thought of Christopher. Tell me about the first time you heard that piano melody and felt your blood go cold. Tell me about the moment in the climax when you realized where the story was heading and you wanted to scream at your screen. Tell me if Christopher gave you nightmares, because I know he gave me nightmares, and I've watched more horror and thriller films than most people watch in a lifetime. And if you have not watched Ratsasan yet, then I have only one thing to say to you. Go find it. It is available with English subtitles on multiple streaming platforms. It is approximately 2.5 hours long, and I promise you, every single second of that runtime is earned. There is not a single wasted frame, not a single unnecessary scene, not a single moment where the tension drops below maximum. It is worth every second of your time, and it will change the way you think about what Indian cinema is capable of. If you have been following this channel, you know what we do at the Ninth Reel. We uncover cinematic masterpieces from every corner of the globe, films that your algorithm will never recommend, films that the mainstream media will never cover, films that deserve to be seen by the widest possible audience but are hidden behind language barriers and cultural blind spots. If you watched our Kantara breakdown, if you watched our Tumbad breakdown, and if this Ratsasan deep dive opened your eyes to another level of cinema that you did not know existed, then do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notification, and share this video with one person, just one person, who loves great thrillers. That is all I ask. My name is not important. The movie is. This is The Ninth Reel, and I will see you in the next reel.